Imagine yourself settling into the most comfortable position you can find, perhaps wrapped in soft blankets, surrounded by the familiar quiet of evening, as we begin a gentle journey through one of existence's most intriguing possibilities. Tonight, we will float together upon the river of time itself, that invisible current that has carried every moment you've ever known, from your very first breath to this exact instant of awareness. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture this river as a vast, luminous stream flowing through the cosmos, its waters made not of molecules but of moments themselves, each droplet a heartbeat, each ripple an experience, each wave a lifetime flowing steadily from what was toward what will be. But what if somewhere in the infinite expanse of existence this river flows differently? What if there are places where the current we take for granted moves in reverse, carrying experiences back toward their origins like autumn leaves drifting upstream to reattach themselves to the branches that released them? This evening, we'll explore this peaceful mystery together, not with urgency or alarm, but with the same gentle curiosity. You might feel watching clouds reshape themselves against a twilight sky, forming and reforming in patterns that suggest meaning just beyond the edge of understanding. Consider how naturally you've always moved through time, as effortlessly as breathing, as unconsciously as your heart beats in your chest. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Spring follows winter as surely as morning follows night, and you've grown from childhood into who you are now, accumulating memories like a tree, adding rings with each passing year. Each ring a record of seasons survived, of growth achieved, of time's patient work upon your being. This forward flow feels as fundamental as gravity itself, so essential to your experience that you rarely pause to wonder if it could be otherwise. Yet tonight, in this quiet space between waking and sleeping, we'll wonder together, exploring possibilities that lie just beyond the borders of ordinary experience. Let's begin by acknowledging the remarkable consistency of your temporal experience, the reliable architecture of cause and effect that structures every aspect of your existence. Every morning, you wake with yesterday behind you and tomorrow ahead, never the reverse. Your coffee cools but never spontaneously warms. Flowers bloom after budding, and conversations begin with hello and end with goodbye. This reliability creates the framework of your entire existence, the stage upon which every story of your life has played out. It's as comfortable and unquestioned as the ground beneath your feet, as certain as the knowledge that dropped objects fall down rather than up. Yet even in our everyday experience, we find hints that time's nature might be more fluid than it appears. In dreams, you move freely between past and future, sometimes experiencing events in sequences that would be impossible in waking life, attending your own funeral, meeting your younger self, living entire lifetimes in the space of a few sleeping hours. In memory, you can instantly transport yourself to moments from decades ago, experiencing them with such vividness that they feel more real than the present, more immediate than the room around you. And in imagination, you regularly travel to futures that haven't yet occurred, planning and anticipating with such detail that these projected moments feel nearly as solid as memories, as if they've already happened and you're simply remembering them rather than imagining them. Throughout history, humans have sensed that time might not be the simple, uniform flow it appears to be. Ancient philosophers, gazing at the same stars you might see tonight if you were to look out your window, wondered whether time was merely our way of organizing change, or something more fundamental to the fabric of reality itself. They noticed how time seemed to slow during moments of great joy or great fear, how a dream could contain what felt like hours or even years of experience in mere minutes of sleep, how the past could feel more present than the present itself when recalled with sufficient intensity, when summoned with enough emotional force. Picture now the great library of Alexandria, that legendary repository of human knowledge, where scholars in flowing robes moved between towering scrolls, their sandaled feet whispering across marble floors cooled by Mediterranean breezes. Here, 23 centuries ago, thinkers gathered to discuss the nature of time itself, their conversations echoing through columned halls, mixing with the sound of fountains and the distant call of seabirds. Aristotle's students would debate whether time could exist without change to mark it, whether a universe frozen in perfect stillness would still experience time's passage, or whether time and change were so intimately connected that one could not exist without the other. They spoke of time as the number of motion, the measurement of change, Yet some wondered quietly whether this measurement might run in reverse in distant realms beyond the known world, in places where effects might precede causes, where the end might come before the beginning. In the shade of ancient fig trees in Athens, philosophers contemplated Heraclitus's famous observation that one cannot step into the same river twice, for the river has changed, and so has the one who steps. But what if, some wondered, the river's flow could reverse? Would one then step out of the river before stepping in? These weren't mere word games or intellectual exercises, but serious attempts to understand the fundamental nature of existence, to probe the boundaries of what was possible, what was conceivable, what might exist beyond the narrow range of human experience. They recognized that our perception of time's direction might be just that, a perception, not an absolute truth, a limitation of our consciousness rather than a law of the cosmos. Travel now in your imagination to a Buddhist monastery nestled in the Himalayan foothills, where the air is thin and clear, and prayer flags flutter in the constant mountain breeze, their colors fading and renewing with the seasons. Here, meditation masters have long taught that time is one of the great illusions, Maya, the veil that prevents us from seeing reality as it truly is. In their understanding, past, present, and future exist simultaneously, like different views of the same eternal mountain. What we call time's forward flow is simply the path our consciousness takes through this eternal landscape. But other paths might be equally valid, equally real, equally true. These Buddhist teachers speak of the wheel of Dharma, eternally turning, where every ending becomes a beginning, where death leads to rebirth in an endless cycle that has neither start nor finish. In this view, the question of whether time moves forward or backward becomes almost meaningless, like asking whether a wheel turns clockwise or counterclockwise when viewed from different sides. The wheel simply turns, and we experience its motion according to our position and perspective, according to the limitations and capacities of our particular form of consciousness. Consider the Hindu cosmology, with its vast cycles of cosmic time, where universes are created and destroyed in the breathing of Brahma, each breath lasting eons beyond human comprehension. Each kalpa, or cosmic day, lasts billions of human years, followed by an equally long cosmic night of dissolution and rest. Within these immense cycles are smaller cycles, wheels within wheels, each containing the entire history of countless worlds. In some interpretations, these cycles don't simply repeat but spiral through dimensions we cannot perceive, sometimes flowing forward, sometimes backward, like a cosmic tide that ebbs and flows on scales beyond human comprehension, beyond even the lifetime of stars and galaxies. The ancient Egyptians, building their pyramids along the Nile's banks with precision that still amazes us today, understood time through the river's annual flood cycle. They watched the waters rise and fall, bringing life to the desert, transforming barren sand into fertile soil, and saw in this rhythm a deeper truth about existence itself. Their god. Khepri rolled the sun across the sky each day like a scarab beetle rolling its ball of dung, but in the underworld, they believed, the sun traveled backward through the night, moving from west to east to emerge again at dawn. This wasn't seen as strange or paradoxical, but as the natural completion of a cycle, two directions of flow creating one complete journey, like inhaling and exhaling, like the systole and diastole of a cosmic heart. The Greeks gave us the image of the Ouroboros, the serpent swallowing its own tail, representing eternal return and the cyclical nature of time. This symbol, found in various forms across many cultures, from Norse mythology to African traditions to alchemical texts, suggests that ending and beginning are merely human concepts imposed on a continuous flow that might run in either direction or both simultaneously. Imagine watching this serpent circle from outside time itself. Would you be able to tell which direction it moved? Or would the very question lose meaning? The serpent's mouth and tail meet in an eternal kiss, neither consuming nor being consumed, but simply existing in a state of perfect, timeless completion. In Norse mythology, the Norns sit at the base of Yggdrasil, the world tree, weaving the fates of gods and humans alike. These three sisters, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, represent past, present, and future in ways that suggest time's flow isn't as fixed as we might think. Urd, whose name means what has become, draws from the well of memory, pulling up the threads of all that has been, Verdandi, what is becoming, weaves the present moment from these threads of past and future. And Skuld, what shall become, cuts the threads of fate with her terrible shears. Yet, in some tellings, they work in harmony so perfect that their individual roles blur, suggesting that past, present, and future are three faces of the same eternal moment, three aspects of a single, timeless reality. The Celtic tradition speaks of thin places, locations where the veil between worlds grows gossamer light, where time behaves strangely. In these liminal spaces, certain groves, stone circles, misty islands, travelers might experience days that last moments or moments that contain years. Heroes would venture into the other world for what seemed like an evening's feast, only to return and find centuries had passed, their loved ones long dead, their kingdoms fallen to ruin. Or conversely, they might live entire lifetimes in fairy realms and return to find only minutes had elapsed in the mortal world. Indigenous peoples around the world have long held concepts of time that differ radically from the linear progression most of us take for granted. The Aymara people of the Andes, for instance, conceptualize the past as being in front of them, because it can be seen or known, while the future lies behind, unseen and unknown. When they speak of moving through time, their gestures reflect this reversed orientation, pointing forward when discussing the past, backward when discussing the future. This isn't merely a linguistic quirk, but reflects a fundamentally different understanding of temporal relationships, one where knowledge and visibility determine orientation rather than sequence. Aboriginal Australians speak of the Dreamtime, a realm where linear time as we understand it doesn't exist. In the Dreamtime, all moments exist simultaneously. The creation of the world, the lives of ancestors, the present moment, and all possible futures coexist in an eternal now. Accessing the Dreamtime through ritual and dream doesn't involve traveling backward or forward in time, but rather stepping outside the stream of linear time altogether into a space where all times are one, where every story is always being told, where every song is always being sung. The Lakota and other Plains tribes speak of time as a sacred hoop with no beginning and no ending, where all generations are present simultaneously. In their vision, ancestors, present beings, and descendants yet unborn all exist together in the same eternal moment, separated not by time, but by awareness. Ceremonies and visions can bring these different points on the hoop into communication, allowing wisdom to flow in all directions through time. Now let us turn our contemplations skyward, to the vast cathedral of space where stars are born and die in cycles lasting billions of years. When you look at the night sky, perhaps through your window or in your imagination, you're already experiencing a kind of time reversal, seeing the past made present through the patient journey of light across cosmic distances. That star you see twinkling above might have actually winked out of existence years, centuries, or millennia ago. Yet its light continues to reach you, carrying messages from a past that, from your perspective, still appears to be present. Consider the Andromeda Galaxy, that smudge of light barely visible to the naked eye on clear, dark nights, our nearest large galactic neighbor. The light you see left that galaxy 2.5 million years ago, when early human ancestors were just beginning to use stone tools, when the Earth's climate was different, when the continents hadn't quite settled into their current positions. In a very real sense, you're looking backward through time, seeing Andromeda not as it is but as it was. And if beings in Andromeda are looking back at Earth, they're seeing our world as it was before humans existed, watching the light from a younger Earth where different creatures roamed, where the story of humanity had not yet begun. This cosmic light delay creates interesting paradoxes for our understanding of simultaneity. What does now mean when stretched across such vast distances? If something is happening in Andromeda at this very moment, by the time we learn of it, humanity might have evolved into something unrecognizable, or ceased to exist entirely, or spread across the galaxy, or transcended physical form altogether. And from Andromeda's perspective, Earth's now is a prehistoric yesterday that no human eyes witnessed, a world we know only through fossils and geological evidence. The further we look into space, the further we see into the past. The most distant galaxies we can observe appear to us as they were over 13 billion years ago, when the universe was young, when the first stars were still forming, when the cosmic story was just beginning. We are, in essence, time travelers every time we look at the night sky, witnesses to events that occurred before our sun existed, before the atoms that make up our bodies were forged in the hearts of dying stars. In the hearts of massive stars, time behaves strangely. As these stellar giants collapse into black holes, the fabric of space-time itself warps and twists like cloth being wrung out, like reality itself being reshaped by unimaginable forces. Near the event horizon, that boundary beyond which nothing, not even light, can escape, time dilates dramatically. To an outside observer, a clock falling toward a black hole would appear to tick more and more slowly, eventually seeming to freeze at the event horizon, its final tick stretched out toward infinity, never quite completing. But from the perspective of that falling clock, time would continue normally. It would pass through the event horizon without noticing anything special about that moment, continuing to tick steadily even as the outside universe seemed to speed up dramatically around it, aging millions of years in what felt like seconds. In the clock's experience, the entire future history of the universe might flash by in what felt like moments. This isn't science fiction, but the actual prediction of Einstein's general relativity, confirmed by countless observations, by the detection of gravitational waves, by the imaging of black hole event horizons. Some physicists have proposed that within black holes, the ordinary laws of physics might break down so completely that time could indeed flow backward. These speculations imagine regions called closed time-like curves, where space and time loop back on themselves like a Mobius strip. A traveler following such a curve might find themselves arriving before they departed, experiencing their journey in reverse, though from their perspective, they would always be moving forward through their own personal time. The mathematics of general relativity doesn't forbid such structures. In fact, they arise naturally in certain solutions to Einstein's equations. Near rotating black holes, specifically, the dragging of spacetime itself creates regions where these closed time-like curves might exist. The rotation of the black hole drags spacetime around with it, like honey being stirred, creating a region called the ergosphere where space itself is forced to rotate. Within this maelstrom of twisted spacetime, paths might exist that loop back through time, allowing for trajectories that end before they begin, at least from an outside observer's perspective. The quantum realm offers even stranger possibilities for reversed time. At the scale of subatomic particles, the familiar rules of cause and effect become fluid and uncertain. Particles seem to exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, at which point they choose a single state. But some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that this choice might ripple both forward and backward through time, with future observations affecting past states in ways that challenge our everyday understanding of causality. Consider the humble electron, that fundamental particle that flows through the wires, bringing power to your lights and devices, that orbits atomic nuclei in everything you see and touch. Richard Feynman, one of the 20th century's most brilliant physicists, once proposed that all electrons in the universe might actually be the same electron, moving forward and backward through time, weaving through history like a single thread, creating an entire tapestry. When moving backward through time, this electron would appear to us as a positron, antimatter, the electron's mirror twin. This isn't mere speculation, but a mathematically consistent way of understanding particle interactions. In Feynman diagrams, which physicists use to calculate particle behaviors, antiparticles are literally depicted as particles moving backward through time. An electron and positron annihilating each other can be understood as a single electron changing direction in time, like a car making a U-turn on the highway of temporality. The mathematics works out exactly the same either way, suggesting that the distinction between particles moving forward in time and antiparticles moving backward might be a matter of perspective rather than fundamental reality. Recent experiments in quantum mechanics have demonstrated what scientists call retrocausality, the appearance that future events can influence past ones. In carefully controlled laboratory conditions, the decision of whether to observe a particle seems to affect the path it took before the observation was made. It's as if the particle somehow knew it would be observed and adjusted its past behavior accordingly. These experiments don't prove that time runs backward, but they do suggest that our common-sense understanding of time's one-way flow might be incomplete, that causality might be more flexible than we imagined. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment is particularly mind-bending. In this setup, photons pass through slits and create an interference pattern, suggesting they behave as waves. But if we measure which slit each photon passed through, the interference pattern disappears. They behave as particles. The strange part is that we can make this measurement decision after the photons have already hit the detector screen. Somehow, our future choice seems to determine the photon's past behavior, as if time's arrow is more of a suggestion than a law at the quantum scale. Let us imagine now, in the spirit of peaceful contemplation, what it might be like to visit a world where time truly flows in reverse. Picture yourself as a gentle observer, floating invisibly through this mirror realm, watching its strange beauty unfold. This wouldn't be a frightening or chaotic place, but simply different, like visiting a country where everyone writes from right to left instead of left to right, where books begin at what we would call the end, where stories unfold from resolution to mystery. In this reversed world, rain would rise from puddles, gathering into droplets that float upward to reform clouds. Watch as these droplets converge, not with violence, but with a gentle purposefulness, like puzzle pieces finding their way home. The clouds themselves would shrink and dissipate, not by dispersing, but by drawing together, condensing into nothing as they release their water upward into the heights of the atmosphere. Lightning would begin as a gentle glow in the ground, gathering strength as it reached upward to reunite with the clouds, ending in a moment of perfect stillness before the flash ungrew into darkness. Trees in this world would be extraordinary to observe through the seasons. In autumn, or what we would call autumn, leaves would rise from the ground, brown and withered, floating up to reattach themselves to branches. Once connected, they would gradually regain their green vibrancy, their cells filling with chlorophyll, as if drinking in life itself. By spring, their spring, these leaves would shrink into buds, which would then disappear entirely into the branches, the tree returning to its winter bareness, though this bareness would represent not dormancy but potential, not death, but preparation for ungrowth. Watch a flower in this reversed world. It begins as a withered bloom, petals scattered on the ground. Slowly, these petals drift together, rising and arranging themselves into the familiar form of a flower. Color returns to them, deepening from brown through pink to vibrant red or yellow or purple. The flower grows younger, fresher, its stems straightening, its petals becoming firm and vibrant. Eventually, the petals close inward, forming a tight bud that gradually shrinks and disappears into the stem, which itself retreats into the ground, returning to seed. The beings inhabiting this reversed world would live lives we might find poetic in their trajectory. They would emerge from the earth already ancient and wise, their bodies marked by the experiences of a full lifetime, their eyes holding the knowledge of decades or centuries. As they moved through their existence, they would gradually become younger, stronger, more vital. Their hair would darken, their skin would smooth, their memories would fade not into forgetfulness but into the peace of innocence, the blessed ignorance that allows for wonder and discovery. Imagine observing a craftsperson in this world, perhaps a potter working at their wheel. You would watch them take a beautiful, complete vase, glazed and decorated with intricate patterns, and gradually unmake it. Their hands would smooth away decorations, remove handles, carefully peel away layers of glaze. The clay would become progressively simpler, losing its form, until it was just a lump on the wheel. But from their perspective, they would be discovering the vase hidden within the clay, uncovering rather than creating, finding what was always there waiting to be revealed. Each movement would be purposeful, deliberate, guided by a vision of what the clay had always contained. In this world's kitchens, cooking would be an act of gentle deconstruction. A chef would begin with a completed feast, a roasted chicken golden and fragrant, vegetables perfectly seasoned, bread warm and crusty. Bit by bit, they would separate these elements. The seasonings would lift away from the vegetables, returning to their individual jars. The bread would unknead itself, flour separating from water, yeast becoming dormant. The chicken would gradually uncook, its skin paling, its meat returning to raw pink, eventually resembling the living bird it once was. From the chef's perspective, they would be purifying the ingredients, returning them to their essential states. Conversations in this reversed world would begin with farewells and end with greetings. Goodbye would mark the start of an interaction, carrying not sadness but anticipation of the discussion to come. Words would flow from conclusion to premise, from answer to question. A teacher would begin class with complex insights and work backward to fundamental principles, ending with the simplest questions that contain the seeds of all knowledge. Students would start wise and gradually discover the joy of not knowing, the pleasure of questions without answers. Imagine a university lecture in this reversed world. The professor would begin by presenting the most advanced conclusions of their field, equations or theories of stunning complexity. As the lecture progressed, these ideas would be carefully deconstructed, taken apart piece by piece. Complex equations would simplify, multiple concepts would merge into single principles, until by the end of the lecture, the professor would pose the simple, fundamental question that started their entire field of study. Students would leave not with answers, but with the perfect question, the seed from which all knowledge in that field would grow. Books in this world would be read from last page to first, mysteries beginning with solutions and working back to the puzzles that created them. Readers would start with complete understanding and gradually release that knowledge, ending in a state of perfect curiosity, poised on the brink of discovery. Writers would begin with finished manuscripts, carefully unwriting each word, removing sentences like sculptors removing excess marble, until they were left with blank pages full of infinite possibility. A novelist in this world would sit at their desk with a completed manuscript, perhaps 1,000 pages of intricate plot and character development. Day by day, they would remove words, sentences, paragraphs. Characters would become simpler, their complex motivations reducing to basic drives. Subplots would disappear, the main plot would streamline, until only the essential conflict remained. Finally, even that would dissolve, leaving the writer with blank pages and the pure potential for any story to emerge. Consider what music would be like in this reversed realm. Symphonies would begin with their final, resolving chord, then gradually decompose into their constituent melodies and harmonies. The emotional journey would be no less meaningful, perhaps even more profound, as complex emotions simplified into pure, essential feelings. A piece that in our world builds from a simple theme to a complex finale would, in reverse, feel like a journey from complexity toward essence, from the many back to the one. A concert would begin with the audience in thunderous applause, gradually quieting as the final notes of the performance grew into silence. The orchestra would then play the piece backward, not in the sense of reversed notes, but in the sense of musical development flowing from complexity to simplicity. The grand finale would give way to development sections, which would simplify into variations, which would finally resolve into the simple, pure theme that was the seed of the entire composition. The audience would leave humming this simple theme, carrying the essence rather than the elaboration. Children in this backward-flowing world would be born with the full knowledge and experience of a lifetime, gradually forgetting as they grew younger and smaller. This forgetting wouldn't be loss but a kind of purification, a return to the essential self unencumbered by accumulated experience. They would begin cynical and world-weary, gradually recovering wonder and innocence, ending their lives in a state of perfect trust and openness. School would be a process of unlearning, of releasing knowledge to make room for wonder. Picture a classroom where students arrive knowing everything about their subject. The teacher's role would be to help them gradually release this knowledge, to guide them from answers back to questions. A mathematics class might begin with students solving complex calculus problems and end with them marveling at the simple mystery of numbers themselves. A history class would start with students knowing all the intricate details of historical events and end with them wondering at the basic question of why humans record their experiences at all. The geography of this world would shift in reverse patterns too. Mountains would gradually shrink as erosion ran backward, with sediment flying up from valleys to rebuild peaks. Every grain of sand on a beach would eventually find its way back to the mountain it came from, carried by winds and waters flowing in reverse. Rivers would flow uphill, gathering water from the sea and depositing it as rain at their sources. The water cycle would run backward, rain rising from the earth, forming clouds that would dissipate into clear sky, the water somehow returning to the vast reservoir of potential moisture that surrounds our planet. Glaciers would grow rather than retreat, though this growth would represent not an ice age but a return to an earlier state of the world. Watch as a glacier uncarves a valley. Rocks would fly up from the valley floor to fill in the spaces the glacier had carved, the U-shaped valley gradually becoming V-shaped again, then filling in completely until the landscape was unmarked by ice. The glacier itself would eventually shrink not by melting, but by having its ice return to snow, then to water vapor, then to nothingness. Cities in this realm would be constantly unbuilding themselves. Skyscrapers would be carefully deconstructed floor by floor, the materials sorted and returned to the earth. Roads would unpave themselves, the asphalt breaking apart and returning to its constituent tar and stones. Yet this wouldn't be decay, but a kind of careful uncreation, each building returning its borrowed materials to nature with the same precision with which they were originally assembled. Construction sites would be places where buildings gradually disappeared, cranes removing beam after beam, concrete dissolving back into its components of sand, gravel, and cement. Watch a city block over the course of a year in this reversed world. Buildings would gradually simplify, losing their modern additions first, satellite dishes disappearing, air conditioning units vanishing, windows becoming simpler. Paint would peel away in reverse, flying up to disappear rather than falling. Bricks would unlayer themselves, mortar turning to dust that would blow away on the wind. Eventually, the buildings would disappear entirely, leaving vacant lots that would gradually return to nature, grass and trees growing younger and smaller until they too disappeared, leaving pristine earth. Perhaps most fascinating would be the experience of memory in such a world. Beings would remember the future but not the past. They would know with perfect clarity what was coming, but wonder endlessly about where they came from. Their anxiety would be not about what might happen, but about what might have happened. They would meet strangers knowing they would become friends, experience first kisses knowing they led to lasting love, face challenges knowing they had already overcome them. Think about what this would mean for decision-making. Every choice would be made with perfect knowledge of its outcome. There would be no risk, no uncertainty about consequences, but there would be deep uncertainty about causes. People would wonder not, what will happen if I do this? But, what must have happened to lead to this? They would see their actions not as causing future events, but as being caused by past events they couldn't remember. Love in this reversed world would follow its own peculiar pattern. Couples would begin in comfortable familiarity, perhaps even boredom, and gradually rediscover passion and excitement. They would know each other less and less well as time passed, ending as mysterious strangers full of unexplored potential. The comfort of old love would give way to the electricity of new attraction, and every relationship would end with the infinite possibility of a first glance. A wedding in this world would be a somber affair, not because it marked an ending, but because it marked the beginning of a journey from unity back to separation. The couple would start as one flesh and gradually become two distinct individuals. They would begin completing each other's sentences and end unable to predict each other's thoughts. Their shared memories would fade. Their inside jokes would lose meaning, until finally they would part as strangers, each carrying half of a story whose beginning they couldn't remember. Meals would begin with satisfaction and fullness, the flavor lingering in the mouth. Bite by bite, food would reassemble on the plate, ingredients separating and returning to their original forms. Cooks would carefully deconstruct complex dishes into their raw components, ending with fresh ingredients ready to return to garden and field. The satisfaction of eating would be replaced by the anticipation of hunger, that keen appreciation that makes every meal a celebration. Imagine a feast in this reversed world. It would begin with satisfied diners, their plates empty, their stomachs full. Gradually, food would appear on their plates, assembled from nothing. They would uneat each bite, placing perfect morsels back on their plates, watching as the meal reconstructed itself. Wine would flow up from their stomachs back into glasses, then into bottles, then into barrels where it would unferment, becoming grape juice, then returning to the grapes themselves. By the end of the feast, the table would be set with raw ingredients, and the diners would leave hungry but filled with anticipation. Now, let us expand our imagination further and consider the possibility of a cosmic library where every moment that has ever existed or ever will exist is preserved, like books on infinite shelves. In this library, beings might read the story of their lives in any direction they choose, forward, backward, or jumping between chapters at will. Time here wouldn't flow, but would simply exist, all at once, like a vast painting that can be viewed from any angle, appreciated in its totality or examined in minute detail. Imagine walking through this library's endless halls, where each book contains not words but experiences, complete and immersive. You might pull a volume from a shelf and find yourself experiencing a summer afternoon from your childhood, complete with the smell of cut grass and the sound of distant laughter, the feeling of sun on your skin, and the taste of lemonade. Another book might contain a moment from Earth's distant future, when the sun has swollen to a red giant and the oceans have boiled away, yet life has found new forms we can't currently imagine, creatures of crystallized minerals or beings of pure energy. The librarians of this cosmic collection would be beings who exist outside of linear time, able to perceive all moments simultaneously. To them, the question of whether time moves forward or backward would be meaningless, like asking whether a painting proceeds from left to right. They would see the entire tapestry of existence spread before them, every thread visible, every pattern complete. They might observe a human life not as a sequence of events but as a complete object in 4 dimensions, a long, winding worm through space-time, beginning as a baby and ending in death. But all parts equally present, equally real. These librarians might observe that what we call causality, the idea that causes precede effects, is merely one way of organizing events. In their view, causes and effects might be more like two sides of the same coin, mutually defining each other, neither truly coming first. A match doesn't cause fire so much as fire, and match cause each other, locked in a relationship that transcends simple sequence. The striking of the match and the appearance of flame are one event viewed from different temporal perspectives. Consider how prophecy might work in such a universe. Prophets wouldn't be seeing the future so much as reading ahead in a book that already exists complete. Their visions would be glimpses of pages yet unread in the human story, but pages that have always existed in the cosmic library. This would explain why prophecies often seem to cause the very events they predict. The prophecy and its fulfillment are two parts of the same pre-existing pattern, necessarily connected, impossible to separate. In this library, you might find sections dedicated to worlds where time flows differently. One shelf might contain universes where time moves in spirals, constantly revisiting similar moments but at different levels, like climbing a spiral staircase where each floor resembles the last but is nonetheless distinct. Another might hold realities where time branches and rebranches, creating infinite parallel worlds that diverge and reconverge in patterns too complex for our linear minds to fully grasp, where every choice creates a new timeline, but some timelines merge back together when they reach the same outcome. There might be volumes describing worlds where time has multiple dimensions, not just the single forward-backward axis we know. In such worlds, beings could move sideways through time, stepping into alternate presents that run parallel to their own. They might have temporal width as well as length, existing across multiple moments simultaneously, experiencing their entire lifetime as a single, extended now. They could turn their temporal orientation to face different directions in time, just as we can turn our bodies to face different directions in space. Some books might describe universes where time flows at different rates in different locations, not due to relativistic effects, but as a fundamental property of space itself. Valleys where centuries pass in moments, mountains where seconds stretch into years. Beings in such worlds would need to navigate not just through space, but through varying temporal currents, like sailors accounting for wind and tide. They might plan journeys not just by distance, but by temporal flow, choosing routes that would age them less or allow them to arrive before they left. In certain sections of this cosmic library, you might find records of universes where consciousness itself determines the flow of time. In these realities, aware beings would carry bubbles of temporal flow with them, time moving forward in their presence but potentially flowing differently or not at all in their absence. A forest might exist in temporal stasis until someone walks through it, at which point time would begin flowing, but it might flow forward for some observers and backward for others, creating a complex weave of intersecting timelines. Let us turn now to the rhythms of nature, those cycles and patterns that suggest time might be more circular than linear, more like a wheel than an arrow. Watch the tides advancing and retreating, each wave reaching up the beach only to withdraw, yet the ocean itself neither advancing nor retreating, but simply breathing in its ancient rhythm. If we filmed the tides and played the recording backward, would we be able to tell? The reversed footage would show waves retreating and advancing, the same eternal dance in opposite sequence, neither more natural nor unnatural than the other. Consider the migration of birds, those great seasonal movements that paint the sky with purpose. In our forward-flowing time, Arctic terns fly from pole to pole, following the endless summer, experiencing more daylight than any other creature on Earth. But imagine if time reversed. They would still be flying from pole to pole, still following summer, just experiencing the journey in reverse sequence. The purpose and pattern would remain. Only our perception of beginning and ending would shift. The birds themselves might not even notice the difference, still following the same magnetic fields, the same ancient instincts, the same call of season and light. Salmon swimming upstream to spawn present another fascinating case. In our time, they fight against the current, leaping up waterfalls, struggling toward their birthplace to lay eggs and die. In reversed time, dead salmon would come to life, swim easily downstream with the current, growing younger and stronger as they return to the ocean. Which journey is more natural? Which requires more explanation? From a certain perspective, both are equally remarkable, equally purposeful, equally part of nature's grand design. Flowers bloom and fade in cycles so regular we set our calendars by them. But imagine a garden where time eddied and swirled like water in a slow river. Some corners might experience accelerated time, roses blooming and fading in moments, entire generations of flowers living and dying while you watch. Other spaces might be nearly frozen, buds suspended on the verge of opening for what seems like eternity, captured in that perfect moment of potential. Still others might experience reversed time, petals gathering inward, colors deepening from pink to red to the green of the unopened bud. Such a garden wouldn't be chaotic, but would have its own strange harmony. Gardeners would need to understand not just the needs of each plant, but the temporal conditions of each bed. They might plant seeds in the reversed time section to watch them disappear into the soil, returning to potential. Or place cut flowers there to watch them return to wholeness, stems reattaching to plants, wilted blooms becoming fresh again. The accelerated sections would be perfect for those who love to watch growth happen, entire seasons passing in an afternoon. The slow sections would preserve beauty in a nearly eternal moment, a rose frozen at the peak of its bloom, never fading, never falling. The seasons themselves, in their endless cycle, suggest that time's linearity might be an illusion we impose on a fundamentally circular process. Spring doesn't truly follow winter so much as winter transforms into spring, which transforms into summer, which transforms into autumn, which transforms back into winter. It's a wheel, not a line, and wheels have no beginning or end, no inherent direction. We experience the wheels turning as a sequence only because our consciousness can only be in one place on the wheel at a time, like walking around a circular path and insisting there's a beginning and end simply because we can only be in one spot at once. Different cultures have understood this cyclical nature in various ways. The ancient Chinese spoke of the eternal dance between yin and yang, complementary forces that create time's flow through their interaction. When yin reaches its maximum, it begins transforming into yang. When yang peaks, it begins its transformation back to yin. This isn't a back and forth, but a continuous circulation, like the way your breath naturally turns from inhale to exhale without your conscious decision, without a moment where you decide, now I will stop inhaling and begin exhaling. The Mayans created elaborate calendars that tracked multiple cycles of different lengths, all interwoven like gears in a cosmic clock. They understood that time wasn't a single flow, but multiple flows of different scales and qualities, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes creating interference patterns. Their prophecies weren't about the future as a distant destination, but about the points where various cycles would align, creating moments of special significance, nodes in the web of time where multiple threads converged. The Aztecs believed in multiple successive worlds, each ending in catastrophe and giving birth to the next. But these weren't seen as separate creations, but as cycles in an eternal process like waves in an ocean. Each world contained the seeds of the next, and perhaps the memory of the previous. Time wasn't an arrow shot from past to future, but a spiral, constantly revisiting similar themes at different levels of complexity and meaning. Modern science has discovered its own versions of these temporal cycles. Circadian rhythms govern our biology, making us sleepy and alert in regular patterns tied to Earth's rotation. These rhythms persist even in constant darkness, showing that they're internalized, written into our very cells. Circannual rhythms track the seasons in our bodies, affecting everything from mood to metabolism, from hormone production to immune function. Even our cells have their own clocks, dividing and regenerating in patterns that repeat throughout our lives, each cell carrying its own timekeeper, its own internal calendar. But what if these rhythms could run in reverse? Scientists have observed that certain genes, when manipulated, can cause biological clocks to run backward. Cells that should be aging begin to rejuvenate. Organisms that should be developing regress to earlier states. These experiments hint that biological time's arrow might not be as fixed as we assumed, that life itself might be capable of moving in either temporal direction given the right conditions. The process of metamorphosis offers a particularly intriguing case. A caterpillar entering a chrysalis essentially dissolves into undifferentiated soup before reorganizing as a butterfly. If we filmed this process and played it backward, we would see a butterfly entering a chrysalis and emerging as a caterpillar. Both transformations are equally remarkable, equally improbable. Why should one direction seem more natural than the other? Perhaps it's only our familiarity with one sequence that makes it seem right, while the reverse seems wrong. The philosopher Henry Bergson proposed that we experience two kinds of time: mechanical clock time, which can theoretically run backward, and lived time, the duration of conscious experience, which seems irreversibly forward. But perhaps even lived time could reverse under the right circumstances. In dreams, after all, we sometimes experience events in reversed sequence, beginning with outcomes and working back to causes, yet the experience feels no less real or meaningful. We wake from such dreams not confused, but simply accepting that dream time follows different rules than waking time. Memory itself suggests that consciousness can move backward through time, at least in a limited way. When you recall a vivid memory, you're not just thinking about the past. In a very real sense, you're experiencing it again. The same neural pathways fire, the same emotions arise, the same sensations echo through your body. The only difference is that this second experience is usually fainter than the first, like a copy of a copy. But what if memory could be perfected, made as vivid as original experience? Would that constitute a form of time travel? Some neuroscientists have proposed that consciousness might actually be constantly traveling both forward and backward through time, but we're only aware of the forward journey. They point to experiments showing that the brain seems to make decisions before we're consciously aware of deciding, as if our future self is constantly sending information back to our present self, guiding our actions through subtle influences we interpret as intuition or gut feelings. The sense of free will might be the story we tell ourselves about decisions that have already been made by our future selves. Consider déjà vu, that strange sensation that you've experienced the present moment before. Most scientists explain it as a glitch in memory formation, but what if it's actually a glimpse of time's bidirectional nature? What if, for just a moment, your consciousness experiences the same moment from two temporal directions, creating that eerie sense of repetition? The feeling passes quickly because our brains aren't equipped to maintain awareness of reverse time, but the brief overlap leaves us unsettled and wondering, touched by a mystery we can't quite grasp. Precognitive dreams present another puzzle. Throughout history, people have reported dreams that seem to predict future events with uncanny accuracy. While skeptics dismiss these as coincidence or selective memory, what if some dreams actually do access future information? Perhaps in the relaxed state of sleep, consciousness becomes less anchored to the present moment, able to drift forward or backward along our timeline, bringing back glimpses of what's to come or what has been. The phenomenon of terminal lucidity, where people with severe dementia suddenly become clear and coherent shortly before death, might hint at time's deeper mysteries. It's as if, approaching the boundary of life, consciousness gains access to all its memories at once, experiencing its entire timeline simultaneously. The linear degradation of memory that characterized the dementia suddenly gives way to a holistic awareness that transcends temporal sequence. Indigenous wisdom keepers have long taught that time is more complex than Western linear thinking suggests. The Hopi language, for instance, doesn't contain tenses in the way English does. Instead of past, present, and future, they speak in terms of manifested and manifesting, what has become solid and what is still becoming. This linguistic structure suggests a completely different relationship with time, one where the past doesn't disappear but remains present in a different form, where the future isn't absent but exists in potential, ready to manifest. The Aboriginal concept of dream time we touched on earlier deserves even deeper exploration. In dream time, all of history exists simultaneously. The creation of the world, the lives of all ancestors, every present moment, and all potential futures coexist in an eternal, ever-present now. Accessing dream time through ceremony, meditation, or actual dreaming doesn't involve moving through time, but rather expanding awareness to encompass all time at once. It's not that time moves differently in dream time, but that the very concept of temporal movement becomes irrelevant. This perspective suggests that perhaps all moments exist eternally, and what we call time's flow is simply consciousness moving through these eternal moments, like a train moving through an eternal landscape. The landscape doesn't change. Only our view of it changes as we pass through. If consciousness could reverse its direction, we would experience time flowing backward, but the moments themselves would remain unchanged, eternal, perfect in their completeness. The Tibetan Buddhist practice of Bardo meditation involves preparing consciousness for the experience of existing between states, including between moments. Advanced practitioners report experiences of time, stopping, reversing, or moving in directions that don't map onto our normal forward-backward axis. They describe states where all of their past and future lives are simultaneously present, where causation becomes circular rather than linear, where ending and beginning merge into a single eternal moment that contains all other moments. Western mystics have reported similar experiences. Medieval Christian contemplatives wrote of entering states of consciousness where they experienced God's perspective, seeing all of time spread out like a landscape viewed from a mountain peak. From this vantage point, they reported, the distinction between past and future disappeared. Everything simply was, is, and will be all at once, in an eternal present that contained all other presents. They called this the eternal now, a moment outside of time that nonetheless contained all of time. Sufi mystics speak of waqt, sacred time that exists perpendicular to ordinary chronological time. In states of deep contemplation or ecstatic dance, they report entering this sacred time where past, present, and future collapse into a single point of infinite depth. From this point, all of existence can be surveyed at once, all possibilities seen simultaneously, all times experienced as one time. The whirling of the dervishes is said to mirror the rotation of the celestial spheres, creating a vortex through which linear time dissolves into eternal presence. Let us venture now into the realm of modern physics, where the nature of time becomes even stranger than our mystical explorations might suggest. According to Einstein's relativity, there is no universal now that exists across the universe. What counts as the present moment for you might be the past or future for someone moving at a different velocity or existing in a different gravitational field. This isn't just theoretical. GPS satellites must account for this time dilation, their clocks running faster than Earth-based clocks due to lower gravitational field strength, or they would quickly become inaccurate. This relativity of simultaneity suggests that past, present, and future all exist equally in what physicists call the block universe. Imagine space-time as a four-dimensional block, with 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. From outside this block, looking at it from a 5th-dimensional perspective, you would see all moments existing simultaneously, frozen like frames in an eternal film reel. Our experience of time flowing would be like a spotlight moving across this block, illuminating moments in sequence, but the moments themselves would be eternal and unchanging. In this block universe view, the question of whether time moves forward or backward becomes meaningless. Time doesn't move at all. We move through time. Or rather, our consciousness traces a path through the 4-dimensional block. Other consciousnesses might trace different paths, perhaps even paths that we would perceive as moving backward through time. But from the block universe perspective, all paths are equally valid, equally real, equally eternal. Your birth and death exist simultaneously in this block, along with every moment between them, all eternally present, all equally real. Some physicists have taken this idea even further, proposing that the universe actually contains regions where time flows in different directions. Sean Carroll and other cosmologists have suggested that the Big Bang might not have been the beginning of time, but rather a moment of minimum entropy from which time flows in both directions. In this model, there would be another universe on the other side of the Big Bang, where time flows in what we would consider the reverse direction. Beings in this mirror universe would experience causation exactly as we do. Causes would precede effects from their perspective. But if we could somehow observe their universe, we would see everything happening in reverse. Their astronomers would observe the universe contracting rather than expanding, stars growing brighter rather than dimmer, matter concentrating rather than dispersing. Their civilizations would appear to us to be unbuilding rather than building. Yet to them, everything would seem perfectly normal, flowing in the only direction time can flow from their perspective. The second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy always increases, is often cited as the source of time's arrow. Things fall apart, energy dissipates, order gives way to disorder. But what if there were regions of the universe where entropy decreased? Would time flow backward there? Some theories of quantum gravity suggest that at the smallest scales, scales billions of times smaller than atoms, space-time itself becomes foam-like, with tiny bubbles where the normal laws of physics, including the second law of thermodynamics, might not apply. In these quantum foam bubbles, time might flow in loops, backward, sideways, or in directions we don't have words for. Particles might move freely through time as they do through space, appearing and disappearing, causing effects before their causes, existing in temporal knots too complex for our macro-scale minds to untangle. Yet somehow, at our scale, all this temporal chaos averages out to the smooth, forward flow we experience, like how the chaotic motion of individual water molecules averages out to the smooth flow of a river. String theory, one of our most ambitious attempts to understand the fundamental nature of reality, suggests that time might not be fundamental at all but rather emergent, arising from something more basic. In some versions of string theory, the universe has 10 or 11 dimensions, most of them curled up too small for us to perceive. Perhaps some of these hidden dimensions are temporal rather than spatial. Perhaps what we experience as one-dimensional time is actually the shadow of a much more complex temporal structure, like how a three-dimensional object casts a two-dimensional shadow. If time has multiple dimensions, beings moving through higher dimensional time would have experiences we can barely imagine. They might be able to step sideways out of our timeline into parallel timelines, or rotate their temporal orientation to experience our future as their past. They might exist as extended temporal objects, experiencing their entire lifetime as a single moment, able to adjust their past to change their future, or their future to change their past. For them, the question of whether time moves forward or backward would be as meaningless as asking whether space moves left or right. Consider the possibility of closed time-like curves, regions of space-time where time loops back on itself. General relativity doesn't forbid such structures. In fact, they arise naturally in certain solutions to Einstein's equations. Near rotating black holes, in regions of extreme space-time curvature, or in hypothetical constructs like traversable wormholes, time might curve so severely that it forms closed loops. A traveler following such a curve would eventually arrive at their own past, potentially able to influence events that have already occurred from their perspective. The Alcubierre drive, a theoretical faster-than-light propulsion system based on general relativity, might also create closed time-like curves. By warping space-time around a spacecraft, contracting it in front and expanding it behind, the drive would allow effective faster-than-light travel without locally violating the speed of light. But such a drive might also allow travel into the past, creating potential paradoxes that physicists are still grappling with. This raises paradoxes, of course. The famous grandfather paradox asks, if you traveled back in time and prevented your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, how could you have been born to travel back in time in the first place? Various solutions have been proposed. The many worlds interpretation suggests that traveling to the past creates or shifts you into a parallel universe where your actions don't affect your original timeline. The Novikov self-consistency principle suggests that any actions taken by a time traveler were always part of history, and therefore cannot create paradoxes. You might try to prevent your grandparents from meeting, but something would always prevent you from succeeding. But perhaps the paradoxes only arise because we're thinking about time travel from our limited, linear perspective. If all moments exist eternally in the block universe, then traveling to the past doesn't change anything. You were always there, always part of that moment. Your arrival in the past doesn't alter history because your arrival was always part of history. The universe is self-consistent across all of time, and what we perceive as causation is just one pattern in the eternal, unchanging whole. Quantum mechanics adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of time's nature. In the quantum world, particles exist in superposition, occupying multiple states simultaneously until observed. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that this superposition extends through time as well as space. A particle doesn't just exist in multiple positions at once, but in multiple moments at once. Its temporal location as uncertain as its spatial location until measurement collapses the wave function. The Wheeler-Feynman absorber theory proposes that electromagnetic radiation involves both retarded waves, which travel forward in time, and advanced waves, which travel backward. When an electron emits a photon, it sends out both types of waves. The advanced waves travel backward in time until they reach an electron that will absorb the photon in the future. This future electron then sends its own waves backward in time, and the interaction between all these forward and backward waves creates what we observe as electromagnetic radiation. This isn't just abstract mathematics. The theory makes the same predictions as conventional electromagnetic theory, and in some ways is simpler and more elegant. It suggests that the future and past are in constant communication through waves traveling in both temporal directions, creating the present through their interaction. Every photon of light, in this view, is a message between past and future, a handshake across time that creates the very possibility of electromagnetic interaction. The transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics extends this idea to all quantum phenomena. In this view, every quantum event involves a negotiation between past and future, with offer waves traveling forward in time and confirmation waves traveling backward. The transaction is only complete when the forward and backward waves match up perfectly, creating what we observe as a quantum event. This interpretation dissolves many quantum paradoxes by suggesting that quantum events aren't localized in time any more than they're localized in space. Recent experiments in quantum mechanics have demonstrated even stranger temporal effects. In quantum eraser experiments, the decision of whether to observe which path a photon took can be made after the photon has already been detected, yet this future decision seems to affect the photon's past behavior. It's as if the photon somehow knows what decision will be made and adjusts its history accordingly. These experiments suggest that the future might influence the past at the quantum level, that causation might flow backward as readily as forward in the quantum realm. The quantum Zeno effect shows that frequent observation can freeze a quantum system in its current state, preventing it from evolving. It's as if observation stops time for the quantum system. Conversely, the quantum anti-Zeno effect shows that certain types of observation can accelerate quantum evolution. These effects suggest that consciousness, through the act of observation, might have some control over the flow of time at the quantum level. Let's imagine now what it might mean for consciousness if time could flow in reverse. Our sense of self seems intimately connected to the forward flow of time. We remember the past, experience the present, and anticipate the future. But what would selfhood mean in a world where time flowed backward? Would consciousness even be possible? Or does awareness itself require a specific temporal direction? Perhaps consciousness in reverse time would be entirely different from ours but no less valid or rich. These beings might experience what we call forgetting as their form of learning, starting with complete knowledge and gradually discovering the mystery of not knowing. Their creativity might involve unmaking rather than making, finding beauty in simplification rather than complexity. Their emotional lives might begin with resolution and work toward anticipation, finding joy in the approach of experiences they know are coming rather than in surprises. Consider what fear and hope would mean in such a world. We fear the unknown future and take comfort in the familiar past. But beings experiencing reversed time would fear the unknown past and take comfort in the known future. They would worry not about what might happen, but about what might have happened. Their anxiety would focus on origins rather than outcomes, causes rather than effects. Therapy in such a world might involve helping people accept the mystery of their origins rather than the uncertainty of their destinations. Or perhaps consciousness is more fundamental than time itself, able to adapt to any temporal direction. Just as we can learn to see properly when wearing glasses that invert our vision, perhaps consciousness could learn to function in reversed time, eventually finding it as natural as we find forward time. The strangeness would only be in the transition, in the comparison between different temporal directions, not in the experience itself once adapted. Some philosophers have proposed that consciousness actually creates time rather than existing within it. In this view, the flow of time is a product of consciousness, organizing its experiences into a coherent narrative. Without consciousness, all moments would exist simultaneously in an eternal, timeless whole. Different forms of consciousness might organize these moments differently, creating different experiences of temporal flow. A hive mind might experience multiple timelines simultaneously, while a quantum consciousness might experience superposed times, living multiple timelines at once until observation collapses them into a single history. This could explain why time seems to pass at different rates in different states of consciousness. In deep meditation, time can seem to stop or stretch infinitely. In dreams, we can experience hours or years in minutes of sleep time. Under the influence of certain substances or in extreme situations, people report time slowing to a crawl or speeding up dramatically. Perhaps these aren't distortions of our perception of time, but glimpses of time's malleable nature, hints that temporal flow is more fluid than we usually realize. The experience of flow states, where people become so absorbed in an activity that time seems to disappear, might represent moments when consciousness temporarily steps outside the normal temporal stream. Athletes describe moments where everything slows down, where they have all the time in the world to make decisions that actually occur in fractions of a second. Musicians speak of entering a timeless space where the music plays itself. Perhaps in these moments, consciousness briefly accesses the eternal now that mystics have long described. Near-death experiences often include reports of life reviews where people experience their entire lives simultaneously, seeing how every action affected others, experiencing events from multiple perspectives at once. Some report experiencing their lives in reverse, from death back to birth, gaining new understanding of how events led to one another. These experiences suggest that consciousness might be capable of experiencing time in ways radically different from our normal linear progression. As we near the end of our contemplation, let's consider what all of this might mean for our ordinary experience of life. Even if time doesn't flow backward anywhere in our accessible universe, the possibility itself enriches our understanding of the present moment. Knowing that time's forward flow isn't inevitable, but one possibility among many, makes each moment more precious, more remarkable. Think of how differently you might experience your life if you truly understood that every moment exists eternally in the block universe. Your childhood isn't gone, but exists forever in its own region of space-time. Your future isn't uncertain, but already exists, as real as your past, waiting for your consciousness to arrive and experience it. Every person you've ever been and ever will be exists simultaneously, all equally real, all equally present in the eternal now of the block universe. This perspective might bring a deep peace, a release from the anxiety of time's passage. If all moments are eternal, nothing is ever truly lost. Every joy you've experienced continues forever in its own moment. Every person you've loved exists eternally in the moments you shared. Death itself becomes not an ending, but a boundary, like the edge of a painting, necessary for the painting to exist, but not a destruction of what the painting contains. Consider how this view might change your relationship with regret and anticipation. Regret assumes that the past could have been different, that other choices were possible. But if the block universe is real, then the past is as fixed and unchangeable as we normally think of it, not because it's gone, but because it's eternal. The choices you made are the choices you were always going to make, perfect in their inevitability. Similarly, Anticipation assumes an open future, but if the future already exists, then what will happen is what was always going to happen. This isn't fatalism, but a kind of cosmic acceptance, a recognition that you're playing a role in a story that's complete and perfect in its totality. At the same time, this view makes every moment infinitely significant. If each moment exists forever, then how you experience this current moment matters eternally. The kindness you show, the beauty you create or appreciate, the love you feel, all of it becomes part of the eternal structure of the universe, frozen forever in the crystal of space-time. You're not just living your life. You're creating eternal moments, sculpting time itself with your choices and experiences. Perhaps the question isn't whether time moves backward somewhere, but whether the direction of time's flow matters as much as we think it does. A piece of music is beautiful whether played forward or backward. Different, certainly, but each version has its own unique beauty. A life lived from birth to death tells one story. The same life experienced from death to birth would tell another story, but both stories would be complete, meaningful, and true. Consider a simple analogy: reading a book. We normally read from beginning to end, experiencing the story as the author intended. But we could also read from end to beginning, experiencing the story as a mystery that gradually reveals not what will happen, but why it happened. We could read chapters out of order, creating our own unique experience of the narrative. The book itself doesn't change. All the words remain in their places. But our experience of it changes based on how we choose to move through it. In the grand symphony of existence, perhaps some instruments play their melodies forward while others play backward, and the combination creates harmonies we can't perceive from our limited position within the music. We hear only our own melodic line and those near us, playing in the same temporal direction. But from outside the symphony, from the composer's perspective, all the melodies blend into something greater than any single part. Imagine if you could step outside time entirely and perceive your life as a complete four-dimensional object. You would see yourself as a long, winding path through space-time, beginning as a baby and extending through all your years to your eventual death. Every moment of your existence would be visible at once. Your first breath and your last existing simultaneously. Every joy and sorrow equally present. From this perspective, the question of whether you're moving forward or backward through time would be meaningless. You simply are, have always been, and will always be, a permanent feature of the universe's architecture. This eternal view of existence appears in many spiritual traditions. The Bhagavad Gita describes Krishna revealing his cosmic form to Arjuna, showing him all times simultaneously, past, present, and future, collapsed into a single, overwhelming vision. The Book of Revelation describes God as the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, existing outside time, seeing all moments at once. These visions suggest that, from a sufficiently elevated perspective, the distinction between forward and backward time disappears into a more fundamental unity. Modern physics echoes these ancient insights. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation, which attempts to describe the quantum state of the entire universe, contains no time parameter. From the universe's perspective, time doesn't flow, it simply is. All moments, all possibilities, all quantum states exist simultaneously in a vast, eternal superposition. What we experience as time's flow might be simply a consequence of our embedded perspective, like how a fish might experience water as flowing past when it's actually the fish that's swimming. As we draw this meditation to a close, let's return to the image of the river of time with which we began. You've been floating on this river throughout our journey, carried by its current as we explored the possibility of streams that flow in other directions. But now, perhaps, you can feel how even your forward motion contains elements of reversal. Your memories carry you backward even as your body moves forward. Your imagination leaps ahead even as your consciousness remains anchored in the present. You are not simply carried by time's river. You are part of it, a current within the current, flowing and eddying in patterns unique to your own existence. Sometimes you move faster than the general flow, time flying when you're engaged and happy. Sometimes you move slower, moments stretching during meditation or in crisis. And in memory and dream, you can indeed move backward, revisiting and reliving moments that from one perspective are gone, but from another perspective exist eternally. The question of whether time moves backward somewhere becomes less important than the recognition that time itself is far stranger, far more flexible, far more mysterious than our everyday experience suggests. We live in a universe where past, present, and future might all exist simultaneously, where causation might flow in both directions, where consciousness might be able to navigate time as freely as it navigates space, if only we knew how. And perhaps, in some sense, we do know how. Every night in dreams, every moment in memory, every instant of imagination, we step outside the simple forward flow of time. We are temporal travelers already, moving through the fourth dimension in ways we're only beginning to understand. The possibility that somewhere time moves backward isn't a strange exception to the rules, but a reminder that the rules themselves are far more permissive than we imagined. Think about the implications for meaning and purpose. If time can flow backward somewhere, if all moments exist eternally, if consciousness can potentially access any point in space-time, then every moment becomes both more and less important. More important because it exists forever, contributing to the eternal structure of reality. Less important because it's just one moment among infinite moments, no more or less real than any other. This paradox might be the key to a deeper wisdom. Hold your moments lightly because they're eternal and cannot be lost. Hold them tightly because they're unique and will never come again in quite the same way. Live with the knowledge that everything you do echoes through eternity, but also with the freedom that comes from knowing that eternity contains all possibilities, all variations, all possible ways the story could be told. As you settle deeper into rest, feeling the gentle pull of sleep, you can release any need to resolve these mysteries. They are not puzzles to be solved, but wonders to be appreciated, like the question of why there is something rather than nothing, or how consciousness arises from matter, or what exists beyond the edge of the universe. These are the questions that make us human, that connect us to the cosmos, that remind us we are part of something infinitely vast and endlessly mysterious. Time flows forward in your experience, carrying you moment by moment through your life, and that is enough. But knowing that it might flow differently elsewhere, that the river might have eddies and reversals and secret currents, adds depth to your journey. You float not on a simple stream, but on a vast cosmic river with tributaries extending into dimensions you cannot perceive, connected to waters flowing in directions you cannot imagine. In this moment, as you rest between waking and sleeping, you exist at the intersection of all times. Your past stretches behind you, your future ahead, but both are present in this instant of awareness. You are the point where all your moments meet, the consciousness that gives meaning to the sequence, the observer who collapses the wave function of your life into specific experience. Whether time moves backward somewhere or not, whether the universe contains regions of reversed causation or not, whether consciousness can navigate time bidirectionally or not, you are here now, in this eternal moment. And this moment, like every moment, is a small miracle, a bubble of experience in the vast ocean of existence, a note in the cosmic symphony, a word in the infinite story that the universe is telling itself. The mystery of time surrounds us, fills us, moves through us. We are temporal beings, but we are also eternal beings, existing forever in the moments we inhabit. Every second of your life is preserved in the amber of space-time, perfect and unchangeable. Yet you also have the freedom to experience these moments, to give them meaning through your consciousness, to be the awareness that brings the eternal into the temporal and the temporal into the eternal. Rest now in the peace of this understanding. Time will carry you forward into tomorrow, as it always has, as it always will from your perspective. But you go knowing that time itself is your companion, not your master, a river that supports you rather than constrains you, a dimension through which you travel on your journey through the mystery of existence. The stars continue their ancient dance above, light from the past reaching into the future, messages across time connecting all moments in an eternal conversation. You are part of this conversation, your life a sentence in the cosmic dialogue, meaningful whether read forward or backward, significant in its very existence regardless of the direction of its reading. The possibility that time flows backwards somewhere reminds us that our universe is far stranger and more wonderful than our everyday experience suggests. It opens our minds to possibilities beyond our normal perception. invites us to question our assumptions about causality and sequence, encourages us to see our lives from perspectives we never imagined possible. Perhaps in some distant galaxy, beings are living their lives in reverse, experiencing their own form of meaning and beauty. Perhaps in parallel universes, versions of you are moving backward through time, unwriting the story you're writing, unlearning what you're learning, returning to the mystery from which you emerged. Perhaps at the quantum level, particles are constantly moving both forward and backward through time, creating the present through their complex dance. These possibilities don't diminish the reality of your forward-flowing experience. They enhance it, adding depth and richness to every moment. Knowing that time might flow backward somewhere makes your forward flow more precious, more remarkable, more worthy of attention and appreciation. You are surfing a wave that could break in any direction, riding a current that could reverse at any moment, yet it carries you steadily forward, faithful to the patterns that create your possibility of existence. And so we complete our contemplation, returning to where we began, but with a deeper appreciation for the mystery of time. Somewhere, perhaps, time does flow backward. Somewhere beings might be living their lives in reverse, experiencing their own version of meaning and beauty. Somewhere, all possibilities might be realized, all directions explored, all variations of the temporal symphony played out in full. But here, in your rest, in your peace, time flows as it should for you. Forward into dreams, forward into tomorrow, forward into all the moments that await your consciousness's arrival. The river carries you gently, safely, eternally, through the landscape of existence. And whether that river sometimes flows uphill in distant realms matters less than the simple miracle that it flows at all, that you flow with it, that you are here to experience the flowing. Sleep now, carried by time's current, knowing that you rest not just in this moment but in all moments, eternal in the crystalline structure of space-time, forever present in the infinite library of existence, a permanent and precious part of the cosmos's endless, beautiful, mysterious story. The question of time's direction dissolves into the peace of simple being, the contentment of existence itself, the gentle blessing of rest in the arms of the eternal now. Let your consciousness drift now, like a leaf on the temporal stream, carried neither forward nor backward, but simply held, simply floating, simply existing in the perfect peace of this eternal moment. Time may flow backward somewhere in the vast reaches of existence, but here, now, in your rest, you are timeless, eternal, perfect in your simple being, complete in your gentle breathing, whole in your peaceful drifting toward sleep and dreams, where time follows its own mysterious rules, where past and future dance together in the endless ballet of consciousness, exploring itself through the miracle of experience.